Welcome to the Adoption Journey podcast. I am your host, Tarsha Smith, and I am so honored and so excited to have yet another fellow adoptee tell her story. And her name is Sariah Baker. Hey, Sariah. So I saw you on Instagram, and believe it or not, I read your post as I was going to bed, and I said, I think I'm going to reach out to her tomorrow. And then you reached out. I said, oh, well, look at that, because I was thinking about it. And I am so glad that you did, because while I know that you gave like a little synopsis on Instagram, I am looking forward to hearing this story. So go ahead and let the people know who you are.
I was born in Shanghai, China, and I think I'm just honestly excited initially to be able to talk about my story because I feel like I've grown up a lot with people telling me my story. And so to finally be able to say, well, what's my story? How do I see that story?
Ooh.
And so now that I get the chance to share it with others and to be able to heal in that process, that journey, I'm really excited to be able to talk about it.
Well, that's what we do here.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So my journey or my story begins in Shanghai, China. I was born in the early 90s. So in China, there was the one-child policy. So in that case, a lot of families wanted boys. And that's just because traditionally when you're a son, you carry the name, you take care of your parents. And then if you're a daughter, you get married and then you take care of your spouse's parents, not your parents. So that's kind of the traditional reason why a lot of people want a son versus a daughter. So I was abandoned in a park when I was about a month old. Kind of the police kind of guessed my age by looking at me going, today is October 17th, September 16th.
Okay, wait a minute. So somebody just put you in a carrier, took you to a park, and left.
The crazy thing about China is I don't know. There was no note. There's no information. They just found a baby at a park and took it to the closest authorities, and they took me to the orphanage that was closest to the area. Where I spent the first 3 years of my life there. And so I have no memory of that. So that's something that I feel like is a blessing that I don't know what happened in that time.
Yeah.
There. It's something that I was part of. And then my adopted family, my father was actually working for Honda at the time in Shanghai, and that's what brought him over to China. And by this time, my parents had 4 older sons. They're all biological children of theirs. And so my mom had to deal with a lot of that. And then she was also pregnant with my younger sister at the time as well. And so in her free time, while my brothers went to school, she actually had a friend recommend helping and volunteering at the orphanage that I was at. And that's how she met me. And they were able to actually foster parent me while they were there initially, just because in China as well, they didn't have those kind of rules like foster parenting in America where, there's a system and things are happening. They were like, oh, you want to foster this kid? Okay. Stay the kid.
Okay.
We don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Then when they fostered me, they kind of, fell in love with me. And from there, they wanted to adopt me. And so that process was very crazy as well, because by the time they were working on their adoption, some humanitarian people had actually finished writing a book about the orphanage I was at. The book is called Death by Default. And it's a story about one of the doctors that was there at the orphanage, and it talked about the cruel things that happened at the orphanage. There were children who were molested, children that were starved, some of the horrible treatment that they had for those children. There's an incinerator that was built right next to the orphanage that I lived in. So it was a very not positive look. And so the Chinese government decided the way that they could best deal with that was that instead of allowing you to choose what kind of kid you wanted, they would assign it for you. And my parents were already in the process of adopting me, so they didn't want that. They wanted to keep on with that process. So
Right.
My dad did whatever it took to allow myself to get adopted into the family. So by the time I was almost 4, I was officially adopted by my family and sent to the U.S.
Okay. So you came to the US at 4 years old.
Yes.
Are you starting to remember anything at
No,
this
but
point?
I now, like I said, the biggest part for me is being able to finally start putting the pieces together. Actually,
Mm,
I
okay.
actually recently inquired my father about his side of the story because I've always been told the story by my mother, and so you have
Okay.
the her version, and so with my dad's version, you're able to some pieces got put together, and then of course I started reaching out to other people who were Chinese and saying, "Hey, what does this mean in what are these what does this mean in Chinese? Is this location still existing?" So I did some of my own research as well to put some of those pieces together. Um,
Okay.
I think it's still, even today, there's still a lot of things I want answered that it's going to be difficult just because it is
Yeah.
China. And
So
those
what
kind
did so if you want to tell from your dad's point, we'll
of,
start there. What did he
yeah, so
say?
my dad's end, the biggest part for him is they had a family friend that was actually there with in China a year prior to they when they were there, and they had adopted a Chinese girl. I think I posted about this on Instagram, but they had gotten a girl there, and she had a cleft palate that they fixed, but then she also had been sucking on the cribs that they had there, and those cribs, the paint was like lead paint, and so if kids sucked on them, it would give them retardation. And so with that, it was a struggle. My dad was really uncomfortable with that first because, like, I don't know if I can take care of a kid who has, those medical situations, and
Right.
how am I supposed to do that? And then in his end, he finally came to a point where he told me, like, well, I had to think for myself that, I would rather give this kid their best life ever. That's what I will be able to do. If I adopt this child, I'll give them everything they can get, even if they have to live with me for the rest of their lives. Like, at least I do that. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of what helped him move forward to adopting me. But also, I think feeds into that the ideology of the saviorism complex that some, I think, adoptive parents can have, and I don't think all parents do that purposely, but I know that I feel like some parents do. They have the idea that I get to save a kid, and this is the best thing, and I'm so excited to show them what their life will be now because I saved them. And so
Yeah.
that's something that I started realizing too, as well as trying to understand that savior is complex, especially throughout the rest of my bring my childhood and being brought up in not only their traditions, but in the traditions of Mormonism, which I also kind of shared a little bit about.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you that. Hold on. We're going to get there. Hold on. Don't jump there yet. Hold on. I want to hear what your mother would tell you when she spoke
Oh
about
yeah. So my mother, she would of course tell her story was that the first time she met me in your orphanage, she saw that there was light in my eyes, and so she's like, I just knew you were, the one I wanted. And she also, my mother is also an author too, so she's written books, and in her book she talks about a little section about me where it's just the idea that she always wanted a best friend. Like her mom was her best friend, her grandmother was her best friend, and she wanted a daughter to be her best friend and be girly and have have this connection with her. And so she also had that desire as well. And it just happened that she was pregnant with my sister, and in the process of wanting to adopt me, so she got 2 daughters.
the two girls.
And so, of course, it's the whole, your birth parents loved you so much that, they found a great place to abandon you where they knew you'd be found. And, you know, they took
So,
care of you for months. It's a nice story, I think, where your parents do
yeah.
your best. But now it's come to us. Now we're your parents. And, we'll love
So,
you and don't treat you differently from the other kids.
okay, because I was going to ask that because you grew up, I assume, knowing you're adopted,
Yep.
knowing, right, because you don't look like anybody,
Oh,
first
yeah.
and foremost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just touched on that, like you weren't treated any differently, or were you?
Well, I think in a sense, part of it is 6 kids. You've got to figure out how to manage the amount of children when you have that. But I think also it's just, the idea of just loving you. If I love you just the way I love all the other kids, you'll feel like you're part of the family. You won't have to make those questions of why am I different, because you won't feel different if we treat you the same.
But how did
But I
you
think
feel?
I think I honestly, at a very young age, I actually questioned, well, I think I should be treated differently. I feel different. Like, I feel that when, I in trouble, or when I, ask for attention, that the way that, that gets, the reactions for that weren't as helpful, because it kind of confused me then, when I was like, well, I'm not trying to be an attention seeker. I just want some attention. I don't know why,
Mm.
but I feel like I need this. Or for myself, a lot of times when children are adopted, after about the age of 3, around there, kids can sometimes suffer from through attachment disorders. So you're either that kid
Mhm.
who's always latched onto your parent, or you're the parent, or you're the child who attaches to everyone but your parents. And that was the kind of kid I was. I tried to get attention from everyone else but my parents, which I
Mm.
ended up feeling of, okay, I'm not getting what I want from them, so I'll go outward.
Okay. And now tell me a little bit about how you were raised.
Yeah. So
And now you can get into that Mormon thing. Yeah, let's go
okay.
there.
Yeah. So my mother's parents were converts to the Mormon Church. My dad converted when I think he was early 20s. He was converted. He served a mission for the church. They met at a singles ward where they fell in love, and they got married. And so we were raised in that idea. And so Mormonism, I guess the practice for them is, they're very big on families. And the
Yes.
thing that I think separates them from a lot of other Christian churches is they believe that your families will be connected forever. So once you die, you are going to go to heaven and you'll be with your family. And there's all these other things, but the principle is you want to go back to your family. You want to be together. And so you have to follow the rules. You have to do certain actions to do that, be baptized, get married in temple to your other partner, and then have kids, right? So it's a very almost kind of black and white kind of way of dealing with life. And it makes sense almost, I think, if you go, okay, as long as I follow the rules, I'll be happy. And so I think being in that kind of mindset and adopted was an extra burden for me, because not only am I having to be this perfect daughter for my parents because I fear I'm going to get abandoned if I do something wrong, I also have to
Mm.
be perfect for my church, because if I do something wrong, I could go to hell. And so it was really, it really clashed in a lot of ways for myself, as trying to keep up with that. I'm the happy person. I don't cry. I don't have feelings, or if I feel confused on something, I don't ask about why I feel confused. Just stay within the program. And on top of that, when I was 14, I came to the reality that I was gay. And then that was another thing that kind of the feel of how much can I live my life the way that I want to live, versus how much should I live my life so that I can please people. I think in one of the podcasts you used to have about people pleasing, right? The idea that you want people to be happy, and you'll kind of do what other people want to do, that so you don't feel that
Yeah.
uncomfortability. And so it was a lot of having that. And
Now, in all of that, in you talking, I did not hear anything about um, them incorporating your culture.
no, so I even asked them that when I got older, and they had advised that. And I think this happens a lot with the parents. I don't know if it's because it's the whole, as long as I love you, you're not going to worry about it. But the inquiry on the part on their end was that I didn't ask. I didn't say, hey, I want to learn my culture. So
I'm
therefore, it
sorry.
was
Let
on
me fix
me
my
that
face.
I didn't ask. So
Did you
you
see
didn't
me
ask,
go?
so you didn't talk about it. Or if you did want to do something Chinese, we did do something. Maybe I'll teach you one recipe, or I'll let you know what, oh, Chinese New Year's here, I'll give you a red envelope. But it wasn't enough to be like, this is why you need to be proud to be Chinese. It's more of, you're an American, and I was very Americanized. And so I think, like with a lot of people, especially growing up, in a white environment, and having the ideology that too in the Mormon church, that the white and delightsome ideology of, white is good. And so kind of live in that. By the time you try to involve yourself with, your Chinese, heritage, you're almost shunned on that end too, because then we're like, oh, you don't know Chinese, that's really odd. And then you're like,
And
no
did
one
you
likes
go to
me.
school with a lot of other Chinese people, or did you
So
interact or with
very
any?
little. But I think,
Okay.
again, my parents, and I think I talked about it initially too, my parents kind of taught me almost very quickly how evil in the sense China was and the things that they had done. And so it gives you a sense of why would I support a country that abandoned me, right? Why would I be part of a country where you do things to women if they have their second child, or if someone's on the street bleeding to death and you don't help them, or these very negative narratives. And then, of course, when I got older, I read Death by Default, and it does give you that warped idea that, oh my God, like, there's nothing good about my culture. Why do I want that? Why do I want to think about communism? Why do I want to feel like I'm attached to that? But it wasn't until COVID and when the Asian hate and when the Stop Asian Hate movement happened, where I had to kind of jolt myself back and go, I am Asian though. Like
Did
that.
you experience any of that?
Just
Any?
I did some, but I think initially, like I said, it's just so hard, especially when you're protected. Most technically, you're protected because you're involved with Mormonism. So you're part of a community that protects you. You're part of part of the white community. You're kind of protecting that, so you don't have that concern because people will defend you, but you yourself are internally having to struggle with that. But there's no one else to give you that support. Go, hey, we're here to protect you. I'm like, but from what? I don't know. I just don't know why they would say that because I'm American. I grew up here, so I could have done these things. So it was a
Mm-hmm.
really difficult time as well. And then, of course, when I was 21, I decided to serve mission for the Mormon Church as well. And I got called Mandarin Chinese speaking, and I was so mortified because, again, so why would I want to teach people who do these horrible things? And so I found myself having to end my mission early because I could not deal with that kind of interaction. And of course, my faith was breaking at that time too. About how do I, what does it mean to be Sariah? What does it mean to be myself? I don't know. I don't know my identity, and it wasn't until I think 3 years ago I started figuring out that I need to know who I am outside of all this. I need to finally give myself the chance and opportunity to be able to say, I'm Chinese, I'm adopted, I'm gay, I don't believe these Mormon teachings anymore. Like, I need to be able to accept that and do something with that instead of giving
Okay,
that time.
so I have another question
Yeah.
because it seems like, and this is just me asking. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. So in the Mormon Church, being that just how you're describing it,
Mm-hmm.
did you struggle there as well, like being accepted, or were you just automatically accepted because of the family that you were
I think
in?
I was automatically accepted because, too, when you're younger, you learn, I think, very quickly roles and things. So, for example, when I moved to Indiana so I lived in Massachusetts for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad got called as stake president. A stake president is kind of like he's in charge of like multiple different counties of a section of the church. So they're branches or wards, which is like a section of a town, and then it gets bigger as a stake, and then so he became that, and so you become kind of you're the daughter of this leader, therefore you're
Okay.
popular. So I think you get really integrated into it. And of course, me being the people pleaser, me being this happy-go-lucky kid, I know that I can easily keep myself safe in that. Right? No one's going to question my insecurities or my traumas because I'm doing what's right instead of
Right. Oh my goodness, just the turmoil I'm
oh yeah,
hearing.
right. And
Okay,
then
so when do you turn the corner and say, okay, I got to strip myself down and build myself back up because I need to know who I am? What does that look like?
yeah. I would say that it's a process, and I think it's a lifetime process, and something that I think happened very slowly in bits and pieces. And I think part of that has to do with my mental health, most definitely being able to question like, why am I feeling disconnected? Why don't I feel? Why am I not grateful? Why can't I feel you know happy when I think associate with Asian people? Why do I feel this anger? Why do I feel like why can't I cry? Why am I not allowed to do that? Why am I not allowed to ask about what does it mean to be gay? Why can't I ask? Why am I limited to all this stuff? And so I think it finally tore me down. The first time I think it happened is in high school, where I was very suicidal, and I was depressed, and I'd sleep my pain away, and I'd do other things to deal with the emotional pain of it, to the point where I finally came to my parents after we had a a fight at a restaurant where my parents were trying to tell me to be happy, and I was like, I'm tired of being happy. I just not. I want to be sad. Like I just want to be sad. I want to feel these feelings. And it came to the point where I came to them and said, I either get help or I kill myself. So you make that determination on me. And
And what did
so
they say to that?
they they decided to get me help reluctantly. They were quite embarrassed as they told me that they had to do that. So that was kind of sad, but I think it's just because they didn't understand why it was such a struggle for me, and it was
To
because,
understand that it wasn't about them.
well, yeah, it wasn't about them. It was about me and my feelings, and
Yeah.
it's hard, I think, because parents, I think, one of the first things I learned in therapy was about listening and versus hearing. Like you're going to hear your kids say a lot of things, but if you're not going to listen to them, that's
Mm.
where the struggle is, and that was where I was finally able to break down the stop this masking of just being the happy and start being able to cry when you want to cry, be angry when you want to be angry.
Okay,
Start
so I have a
talking about
question though, and I forgot about this aspect. So you're going through this because I'm more focused on your parents, but what about your siblings?
um
Are they understanding what's happening here, or are they just kind of
no. I think it's because
going with
we're
the
all
flow?
and I think I said part of it has to do with being a family of six. I think we all had our different struggles, and so we're all, I
Gotcha.
think, asking for help. But first, are my parents going to balance that out? And so, which kid? What can I do for what kid? And so, I think I was blind a lot to what was happening in their lives because
Okay.
you're stuck with yourself, and I don't know, it's kind of hard. And I think, as we were older too, we kind of associate that we didn't know how much um, everyone was struggling in their own ways because of how we were raised,
Mm.
how
Because
we got.
everyone just showed up and let me be the person that our parents want
Yeah.
us to be.
Well, yeah, and the way I like to tell people, it's the three pillars of our family was, definitely spirituality, and
Hmm.
God and Mormonism, health, being thin and healthy, and then of course it was education, making sure that you go to the good schools and you get that kind of stuff. So you're trying to keep that going, and so depending on how you're doing as a sibling or a family member, like we're all
That just
struggling
made me tired thinking about that, but okay.
yeah, because you're like, how am I going to, be successful to them, but also for myself and for me for a very long time. I never needed to do that because I didn't care about myself enough. I didn't care what happened to me because I was doing quote unquote what was right. I was doing the right thing. I was making sure that I made the good choices so that I could be a good daughter, right?
Right. So now I want to ask the question, at what point do you let your parents know that you are gay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like
That's
a
a
fun
great question.
conversation.
I mean, I definitely had a whirlwind. I remember in high school, I told my mother I was lesbian when I figured that out because I had a best friend who was gay, and that kind of helped me kind of initially come out. And it was one of the, I guess, worst experiences ever because it was about, oh, okay, well, if you're a lesbian, then I'm not going to support you with college. I'm not going to do these things. You're like, oh, well, so there are consequences for being gay. Okay, then I guess I'm not gay, because of that. Well, are you having sex with them? And I'm like, I'm 18. No, I'm not. She's like, then you're not gay. You have same-sex attraction, which is a very big terminology in Mormonism. It's the same-sex attraction. You're not gay. And so
Huh.
that I think scared
You
me.
just taught me
So
something. I didn't know that that's how it was viewed.
yeah.
Okay.
So and then of course that was the end of it. And then in college, I kind of got taught about I joined a group of college students who were supporting gay rights and stuff. And so I learned the word pansexual. So I told my parents, oh, I'm pansexual. That seems much more easier to deal with. Where it's just like you like people because of their personalities. I just like them because they're them. That's great. And then of course, while I was questioning my faith, I started dating women. I started, I guess doing a double life. I double lifed myself because I wanted to at least figure out if this was something that I connected with. And so, of course, finally, after a while, my dad, I think he kind of found out much faster than my mother, and he was okay. He actually left it. That was one part of his reasons for leaving the Mormon church. A couple of years, about 5 years ago, he left the church for that to support my brother and myself. And then my mother kind of was forced to be told and shown when I got my my girlfriend on one of our I think her book opening that she had, and she was there, and then she was there when I graduated, and so my mom kind of figured out, oh, she's. I'm like, yeah, there you go.
Okay. So did your mom also leave the church?
No, she is a devout Mormon. So she and probably two of my siblings are still members of the church. The rest of us have left.
Have left. Okay. All right. So back to Sariah. And now she is on her healing journey. And tell me, speak to your therapy. At least, of course, you don't have to get into details, but some people are on the fence about going to therapy. Does it work? What does speak to that?
I think it's a process, and I tell people to go to therapy, even if you don't think you have an issue. I think therapy is a wonderful way to be able to understand yourself or take that step to go, do I feel good where I'm at? So I think my initial therapy was about letting go of that perfectionism, that big situation that I had. And then also having to accept certain traumas in my life that I didn't understand. Again, it's, I think, part of being Mormon. I think part of family is that when I was 9, I was sexually assaulted by a family member, and so having that and being able to know what that means and going, oh, I don't know if I ever thought of it that way. I just knew it was something that happened. My parents asked me if I needed therapy for that, and I said, well, I'm 9, and I don't know why.
I'm sorry. Can you stop right there?
Yeah.
Your parents asked a 9-year-old girl that had just endured what she endured if she needed therapy for that, and let you make the decision?
Yeah, another reason where it's why are you asking me if I need it? You can do it, right?
You asking?
Yeah.
A 9-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay. So you never got therapy for any of that. No, it just kind of happened, and all right, you don't need therapy. Okay, we're gonna keep.
Because I didn't ask, so it doesn't matter. So yeah, they having to learn those.
So I'm sorry. So you had to ask to learn your heritage, and you're supposed to ask for therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, like I said, it's crazy because I mean, especially when you're, I think, adopted again, you don't think you have the right to ask, right? I didn't think I had the right to well, if I say yes, I do, is it going to make them mad?
Tell me why you thought you didn't have the right to ask.
Well, because again, I think part of that you're grateful. You're supposed to be grateful for where they're at. You're in a good place. I mean, I think similar to another girl that you talked to, we traveled the world. I went to France for high school. My family took us on cool vacations. I went to amazing schools for college. I had my master's. It's like these status ideologies where it's like on the status level, I was living it up. I would seem like someone who, as my mother likes to tell people, you wouldn't know that she was adopted if you had seen her life. She was so on top of the world. So I think
okay, hold on. I have to address that statement. Because to me that sounds like if you're adopted, that means that you don't have a good life. But and just speaking from what it sounds like your mom was saying, her ideology about an adopted person, they don't have good lives. But our adopted child, you wouldn't have even known.
Because she lived a good life. I mean, look at her.
Because she lived a good life.
She has a bachelor's degree. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's funny. I mean, I get a lot of times where my parents come to me and tell me hey, we didn't think you would actually, get a degree, or we didn't think you'd actually be able to drive. Just with those kind of ideologies of, you were, because of where you were in your beginnings, whether it was the physical therapy side, whether it was my eyesight, whether, it was malnourishment and me being able to, gain that weight. Those little things where it's just but I did because I thought I had to. So there's a difference between oh no, I just did it because it was you did all this, and they did. I give them credit for giving me those tools and the kind of environment it was to be able to go to physical therapies, to be able to go to good schools. But again, I think similar to a lot of adoptees, it's the emotional part that gets, I think, forgotten a lot. And realizing that if you're going to adopt a child, you have to realize that they need something more than just standard upbringing and just I'll give you what everyone else gets, and hopefully that's.
And I always say that I believe that adoptive parents need to have some kind of class, some kind of training, something more than a social worker talking to them or whomever they're, telling them their thoughts, because it's a whole thing. Because I also think sometimes they're like, oh, we're getting this baby. Okay, but what about the child? What about the
Mm-hmm.
teenager? What about the adult?
Right.
Some adoptive parents don't think that all the way through. They're just like, oh, look at the baby, or look at the, the little toddler. And they don't think about everything else.
I know, and I think it's interesting too, because in some cases, I mean, even in the beginning, I had a few times where, it's so funny in the way that my mom was writing one of her books about, her book was written more about like parents who want to go back in the field of work, but she had a section with me where it's like, oh, my mother actually told us not to adopt, right? And it was understandable. You have 4 boys. Like, why would you want another kid in that? But my mom's like, we didn't care. We just did it. Like, right? Some people say, oh, of course, you just love that kid. But if you're going to love that kid, you better do, the responsibilities for that kid.
Yeah.
Financially, all that stuff.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, on your healing journey,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that therapy is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
What is the next? Is there any way at all, do you think, because I know some people have a reunification journey or any, being that you are from another country,
Mm-hmm.
is there any way for you to connect with birth family, or have
Oh,
you?
I appreciate it. So fun fact, I guess in general is like I never wanted it initially again. I think just growing up with my family, right, my forever family, it was like why would I want to? Or even I think one time I think my mom was like, my parents are just dead. Like we have to be dead. That's the only way that it's going to be fine. And I don't have to deal with it. I have to look for them. But then I think I finally decided to do a 23andMe. And when I did that, I found a possible second cousin. I'm very most likely he's my second cousin on my dad's side. And so I got to connect with him. And that was something that was really eye opening to have that kind of connection. I'm not currently in contact with him now, but just that initial association was that drive. And then
Was
as
he in the States, or was he still over in China?
China, I think silver in China, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then that was kind of, and I think that's what's so hard is especially when you're being internationally, you know, and I think my partner says it best. It's like that I can't have those certain expectations that I think other people have, where it's like, oh, I'm just expecting now that I've connected with him, he'll tell me everything, we'll be best friends, we'll, fly into the sunset.
That's not an expectation, even with those of us that were adopted right here. I can speak to that.
Yeah.
I've found my maternal side, and they've told me, I guess, they've told me what they know. But to me, I'm like, either I'm still asking questions because I feel like there's still more to my story, or I don't know. And on the flip side, now I'm getting ready to embark on finding my paternal side. Who knows? I'm going to take all of you on that journey with me, because I actually talked about it on IG the other day with I took a ancestry DNA test. So no matter where you are, you can connect with people, okay, and still not get that relationship.
But I think it's been a nice awakening, and one thing that really, I think, again, blew me out of the water and kind of is the reason why I'm where I'm at, why I created this Instagram, why I created my YouTube channel, is because I went to San Francisco with my sister to visit with my brothers, and I was there and just looking at all these Chinese people, thinking, one of these people my mom or dad maybe, but also just that feeling of this is where I belong. These are my people. Like this is something that's important to me. And so when I came home, my partner was like, "We're gonna do this. We're gonna look for them. We're gonna find them. We're gonna do whatever we can to bring awareness to this. I'm gonna start telling my story because I deserve to feel like I know that I am who I am, and that we'll get to know who I am outside of what my parents' stories are, what other people have told me my story is. I want to know myself and be able to share that well in the truest, honest way, because it gives me that drive to find my birth family in some way, and that's something that I pushed on my parents. I even asked my parents to do was that I want to be on this journey, and I know it's hard and difficult, and I would love your support. I love your financial support, possibly, to be able to do that. And both my parents have not done that for me, so I think it says a lot in that end. But I had other people who decided to take that time to help me, who who aren't my
So,
relatives.
do your parents think that this is something that you should not be
Um,
doing?
well, my father has kind of expressed, of course, the concerns that, it could be a scam. People could lie, like, oh, I'm your grandparent. But also, it's China. And of course, I think in the 90s and just in their history, they are at a time where they didn't keep their history really, set. Or if people
Okay,
did have kids outside of the one child policy, they were afraid that they would get in trouble. So even if you did find them and say, "Hey, my parents," they could say no and say, "I'm not your parent. I refuse
gotcha.
to tell you that." So there is that, of course, I think like any parent, that concern of you could, I just explain it. I think I've worked hard emotionally and mentally and I'm healing myself on my many journeys that are all somehow interconnected to allow myself to go, I understand you, I hear you, but I'm going to do. So,
Right. So,
so
are you feeling now that you have started this journey and on this healing, how are you feeling about yourself and your heritage? Like, are you more accepting of that now?
mhm. Yeah, I definitely would say I am. And like I said, connecting, I mean, one thing that I told my partner too when I moved to Portland, Oregon. The first thing I told her is like, I want to make friends with adoptees. I've grown up in my all my life, I've grown up moving to different states or countries where you're automatically put into a group. If you're Mormon, you're automatically in your group. That's what it is. I didn't choose my groups because you're just thrown into one. And so to finally have the choice to say, I want to actually associate with adoptees. I want to associate with, people who are Asian. I want to understand what I've missed because I wasn't given that opportunity. I wasn't able to know
Mm,
another adoptee, and so being able to have that and being able to finally find real friends who aren't adopted but can say I can understand your story and I will go with you on this journey has allowed me to I think really um, find myself not only about being Chinese and learning the language and the culture, but also just
I was just going to ask you about learning the language and yeah,
yeah, I think, and I mean, I think that adds so much to it. But then again, it's something that I really appreciated is how it helps me connect with other adoptees. Like, I think initially, you start with your Asian adoptees, like it's my focus, Chinese adoptees, and then it just starts expanding, and then the appreciation itself. I think one of the Instagram groups was like the BIPOC adoptees, and I never thought
hmm,
about those other areas. I'm like, well, I'm be open minded to that because those are adoptees too, and my brother has two adoptees that they have as well, and so you're kind
oh,
of learning.
really?
Yeah, so they were through a full foster system as well. So you kind of start realizing that your story, in a way, is integrated with everyone else's story in that realm that you all share this journey of pain and sadness, but also of healing. And to be able to, I think, have these conversations and to be able to share these stories does that for people. And I think that's what drives me and allows me to still have that time and energy to go. I can heal myself. I can share my story. I can talk to other people while also being able to give myself that opportunity. And I think the real word is that choice to say I have that choice to be able to move them. I want to, even if it
Right.
means that's going to be years. And technology has to be the thing to help me find that. It's something that I can do and but not feel alone this time doing it.
And doing this is so therapeutic.
Yeah.
Listening to these stories, talking about it, having different conversations, seeing other perspectives, it is so therapeutic. And that's one of the reasons why I do this podcast is because I know people are listening and they have questions and some people are afraid to talk to anybody about it. Some people are embarrassed about it. But, this is a safe place and people, we come and share our stories. All of us have a story
Yeah.
and they all look different, but we're still, like you just said, we're still intertwined. Like we are our own club, like for sure. For sure. So one of my last questions that I love to ask all my guests, if you wanted to speak to the adoptees and tell them anything at all, what would it be?
Ooh. That's a good question. Um, I think, especially on the journey that I've been on and kind of what I've seen. Um, sorry. I think my advice to to adopt you is to ask. I think that's the one thing that I didn't do for years because I didn't think I could. I didn't think I could ask questions. I didn't think I could start asking, people about why am I different. I think I just kept it to myself because I think we feel, at least on my end, we have an obligation to people to make sure that their lives are easy and that their lives are that it was worth it. It was worth adopting us. It was worth everything, but we don't do that for ourselves. And I think that's the saddest thing that I've had to learn. Later in life, I joke a lot with people that I'm like 30 years old, and I feel so behind in this whole process. Like I just wish that I watch those videos of the young people are like, I'm 13, I'm going to find my birthday. I could have been that child, but
you're not behind. You're right on schedule. I promise you.
No, I've had to learn that, but I think those are the things that I think a lot of adopters are feeling around that hope. And I think that hopelessness because we use those words. We're supposed to be grateful. We're supposed to be happy. We're like, why aren't you happy? Like, you have the life, But I think it's so important to know that you also have your rights to your feelings. You have a right to be able to do something with those feelings, whether it be getting therapy, whether it's starting to ask, where did I come from, whether it means, having to sneak into your thoughts and look at the information and go, what does this mean on the birth certificate or something like that. I think you deserve to be able to know your story and then to embrace it after that.
Absolutely.
I think something like that, it can be scary, but you find that support, you find those people to share what you feel you need to share. I mean, I know that in a point where in my life, just recently, I had to write a letter to my parents on my feelings, like about everything, but how, if you're going to write a book about me, that you have to realize that this is what happened. This is part of the journey of being adopted. It's not always a happy life for these people. They're going to feel things. They're going to question, hey, I don't understand why when you did this, it made me feel this, but I wanted you to know that that's what I felt. And even though my parents didn't acknowledge in the way that I wanted to about how those things impacted me, it's something that I was able to tell my truth, and I was able to share my feelings to allow myself to move forward. I think that's the last thing I want people to feel that they can't move forward. They're just stuck in just saying, I'm an adoptee. That's all about me. So I think it's more to you than just that.
Well, I love that. And so I think the one thing that stood out the most for me was to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. Please don't be afraid to ask the questions. You deserve to know. So please don't be afraid to ask. Let the people know how they can find you on IG and on YouTube.
Awesome. So my handle for both my Instagram and my YouTube, is Adoptee Apostate. The Adoptee Apostate. Sorry, I was my partner. The Adoptee Apostate. I'm always on it, but I don't look at my own handle. The Adoptee Apostate is my handle for both my YouTube and for my Instagram.
And I will definitely drop her link when we drop this episode for sure so that you can follow her. Thank you so much for coming and telling your story. I appreciate it. You are my first, and I believe you're my first international adoptee. Yeah, I love that. So hopefully we'll have more to speak to after this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And until next week, bye, family.
Bye.